On this week's Lazy Sunday Upload is the director of the Red Pill documentary, Cassie, Jaye. Now, I spent most of Friday and the weekend at the 3rd International Men's Conference held here in my own backyard on the Gold Coast in Australia. And some of you know that because I had the pleasure of meeting you and various others with a shared interest in men's rights issues. I also had a brief chat with Cassie Jaye about her railroading on Australian TV program The Project and subsequently Channel 7's Sunrise program. I'll have more about that in an upcoming video. Now, stupidly, I did not bring any equipment, so I was unable to get anything on film, which was unfortunate because there were some truly great presentations at the conference, none better than Bettina Arndt's keynote speech. I'm sure you'll be able to see those presentations when all the editing is done at some point in the future. But my YouTube buddy 8-Bit Thoughts did get an interview with both Bettina and Cassie, so I go over to his channel and check out those interviews if you're interested. So on Friday, the conference was kicked off with a viewing of The Red Pill, followed by a Q&A with Cassie Jaye. Now, this was my first time to see the film in its entirety, and it was, for the most part, exactly what I imagined it to be, a basic summary of the kinds of issues that men and boys face in society today. And that's not in any way a criticism of the film, rather it's a reflection of the fact that since I take a great interest in these issues, there was nothing in the film that I found at all surprising. However, if you're not acquainted with these issues, I'm sure you'll find the material both interesting, confronting, and perhaps even shocking. For me personally, the biggest takeaway, and I think the most commendable aspect of the film, is what it says about Cassie Jaye. He was someone who had strong preconceived notions about the men's rights movement, but took the time to listen to their views, challenge her own views, and reflect on her own values, and ultimately change her mind. Unfortunately, that's an all too rare quality these days. Cassie's capacity to listen and to be open to new ideas is an example we would all do well to follow, and why I think the following excerpt from a presentation Cassie gave at the Institute of Noetic Sciences last month is the perfect choice for this week's Lazy Sunday Upload, as she emphasises how important the capacity to listen truly is if we want to solve difficult problems. Enjoy.
In 2013, I decided to meet my enemies. I was a 27-year-old award-winning filmmaker and a proud feminist, and I was determined to expose the dark underbelly of the men's rights movement. For 1 year, I traveled North America, meeting the leaders and the followers of the men's rights movement, and I spent anywhere from 2 to 4, 6, sometimes up to 8 hours filming each individual person. I filmed 44 people. And there's an important rule in documentary filmmaking. As an interviewer, you do not interrupt. So I'm asking men's rights activists, MRAs, questions. And I'm getting long answers, their full life story. And it's important to note that for many of these people, they'd never been interviewed before. But they've also, many of them, had never been asked, what's your story? What makes you who you are? So it was just pouring out of them. So months and months and months of this goes by. And in the moment, I didn't realize it. But now looking back, I can see that while I was conducting my interviews, I wasn't actually listening. I was hearing them speak. I knew the camera was recording. But in that moment of sitting across from my enemy, I wasn't listening. What was I doing? I was anticipating. I was waiting to hear a sentence, or even just a couple of words in succession, that proved what I wanted to believe, that I had found the misogynist, the ground zero of the war on women. A couple of moments I thought I had it. There was one men's rights activist that said, just walk outside and look around. Everything you see was built by a man. His statement felt anti-women. I felt my jaw clench. If I were with my friends, I would have delivered a sassy, "Oh, really?" as a warning that a rant worthy of a mic drop and a bow was fast approaching. But I sat quietly, as a documentarian should, while removing all the space between my upper and lower molars. After a year of filming, I was reviewing the 100 plus hours of footage I had gathered, replaying and transcribing it. Which, believe me when I say, no one will ever listen to you more than someone who transcribes your words. Write that down. So I was transcribing, which meant I was replaying the footage over and over again, getting every word meticulously. And I realized that my initial knee-jerk reactions to certain statements weren't warranted, and my being offended didn't hold up to intense scrutiny. Was that statement about men having built the skyscrapers and the bridges anti-women? What would be the gender reverse scenario? Maybe a feminist saying, just look around. Every person you see was birthed by a woman. It's a powerful statement. And it's true. Is it anti-male? I don't think so. I think it's acknowledging our unique and valued contributions to our society. But luckily, while I was filming The Red Pill, I kept a video diary, which ended up tracking my evolving views. And in looking back on those 37 video diaries that I recorded that year, there was a common theme. I would often hear an innocent and valid point that a men's rights activist would make. But in my head, I would add onto their statement a sexist or anti-woman spin, assuming that's what they wanted to say, but didn't. So here are 3 examples. A men's rights activist would say, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters for women in the US, and only 1 for men. Yet multiple studies show that men are just as likely to be abused by an intimate partner. I would hear them say, we don't need 2,000 shelters for women. They're lying about being abused. It's all a scam. But looking back on all the footage I gathered of men's rights activists talking about shelters, and all the blogs they've written, and all the video live streams that they've posted on YouTube, they never say that. All they say is that men are abused too and deserve care and compassion. So example number 2. Men's rights activists would say, where is justice for the man who was falsely accused of raping a woman, and because of this accusation, he loses his college scholarship and is branded with the inescapable title of rapist? I would hear, a woman being raped isn't a big deal. It's as if I didn't hear the word falsely accused of rape. I only heard he was accused of rape. Of course, rape is a big deal, and all the men's rights activists agreed it is a horrible thing to happen to anyone. And I eventually realized that what they're saying is they're trying to add to the gender equality discussion. Who is standing up for the good-hearted, honorable man who loses his college scholarship or his job, or worse yet, his children, because he was accused of something he absolutely did not do? Third example. A men's rights activist would say, female genital mutilation is outlawed in most countries throughout the world. Yet infant male genital mutilation, also known as circumcision, is routinely practiced and rarely questioned. I would honestly think they said, female genital mutilation should be legal too. This is so far beyond what they said. Why was I doing this? I was assuming the absolute worst in them because I thought they were my enemy. Eventually, I couldn't keep denying the points that they were making. These are real issues. But in an effort to avoid agreeing with them completely, I changed from putting words in their mouth to acknowledging these issues, but insisting it's a woman's issue. So here are some examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist, MRA, would say, men are more likely to lose their child in a custody battle. I would conclude, because women are unfairly expected to be the caretaker, it's discrimination against women that women get custody more often. An MRA would say, on average, men die 5 years sooner than women. and I would conclude, for those 5 years, women have to live alone and fend for themselves in their vulnerable elderly state. An MRA would say, 99% of all war deaths are men. And I would say, women couldn't even serve in combat positions until recently, so combat deaths throughout history have been a reflection of discrimination against women. Last example. You don't like me back then, do you? Last example. An MRA would say, men are 80% of all suicides throughout the world. And I would say, but women attempt suicide more often. Ha! Ha! It's not a contest, but I was making it into one. Every men's rights issue that they would bring up, I would have a counter of how it's actually a woman's issue. But here's what I later realized. There's nothing wrong with considering what women go through. But why couldn't I simply admit, accept, and have compassion for men's issues without jumping at the opportunity to insist that women are the real victims? So rewind back to 2013. I vividly remember reading Warren Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power. I was only about 2 months into filming The Red Pill, and on page 70 of his book, this is what he wrote. Hold on. So this is page 70 of his book. During the Civil War, the government passed a conscription act allowing in essence for an all-male slave trade. More than 500,000 men, 623,026 men, were killed in the Civil War, the equivalent of 11 Vietnam Wars. Try to imagine 11 Vietnam Wars in a row in which only females are drafted, in which 620,000 female soldiers, your sister, your mother, your daughter, arrived home in body bags. For a second, my mind's eye saw it, and then I was enraged. How dare he ask me to feel the emotional impact of seeing 620,000 women and girls' dead bodies lined up side by side as far as the eye can see? How dare he ask me to imagine that sight? I seriously thought this, 2 months into filming. And when my inflamed rage started to simmer, I had 3 options. Either continue reading, which began to feel like a masochistic effort. No offense.
No problem.
Or I could forget about it entirely and move on to something new. Watch a reality show, read a Jezebel article, scan Pinterest. Or I could sit with my thoughts and really analyze not only what Warren is saying, but why I am feeling the way I am. And I think that's what you're asking. While making the red pill, I couldn't abandon my emotions. I had to examine them in order to complete this film with a thorough understanding of what men's rights activists are saying and what the average person is thinking. Because as a documentary filmmaker, I take it on as my responsibility to grasp a topic so fully and deeply as I can, and I have to be immersed in that world, learning from the experts who have spent decades researching and honing how they deliver this information. And then I have to go back to where my innocent mind was before I began researching this topic, because that's my audience. I have to know what they can absorb in a 2-hour film, and I have to decide what's the most important information the audience can take away when they leave that movie theater or turn off the TV. In the grand scheme of making the red pill, it didn't take me long to realize that men's issues need compassion. It took me a few months. But when I got it, I got it. These are human rights issues that uniquely or disproportionately affect men. Paternity fraud uniquely affects men. The United States Selective Service, in the case of a draft, still uniquely affects men. Workplace deaths disproportionately affect men. War deaths, overwhelmingly men. Suicide, overwhelmingly men. Sentencing disparity. Life expectancy. Child custody, child support. False rape allegations. Criminal court bias. Misandry. Failure to launch. Boys falling behind in education. Homelessness. Veterans issues. Infant male genital mutilation. Pregnancy entrapment. Lack of parental choice once a child is conceived. Lack of resources and compassion for male victims of domestic violence. So many issues that are heartbreaking if you are the victim or you love someone who is the victim of any of these issues. These are men's issues, and most people can't name one because we believe that men have all the power, they have all the rights. But these issues deserve to be acknowledged. They deserve care and attention and motivation for solutions. Accepting that these are human rights issues only took me a few months. But there was something far more difficult for me to face. If you start to humanize your enemy, you in turn may be dehumanized by your community. And that's what happened to me. One of the most difficult parts of making the Red Pill was screening it and publicizing it. With all of my previous films, the screening tour process was always a very positive experience. The message of my first documentary, called Daddy I Do, was to encourage better comprehensive sexual education in schools, to arm kids with the tools to make better choices and to secure a brighter future. And colleges loved my film. Planned Parenthood funded a Northwestern and Alaskan tour of my film, with all travel expenses paid and dinner parties, talking about how much this film can make a real positive difference. With my second feature film, The Right to Love, it was released while gay marriage was still illegal in most states. So the screening tour process was a mixture of love and tears, hopeful tears that one day any person could marry the person they love. As much as I wish I could say the Red Pill screening tour has consisted of me being interviewed about how we can help men and boys in these dire situations, that has not been the case. Almost every interview I've done, I'm asked to defend myself against malicious, slanderous, libelous, defamatory statements that have been made against me, and my 4 minutes on air is stolen by these erroneous claims. It's no secret now that after making the Red Pill movie, I no longer call myself a feminist. But it wasn't learning about men's issues that made me part with feminism. It was actually learning about feminism that made me leave feminism. And I know that sounds harsh, especially when you wear that label as your identity. But how could I be a part of a movement that was not willing to listen, that didn't want me to listen, and doesn't want others to listen? You may be thinking, well, that's not my movement. But I say that because there was a calculated smear campaign against me, and my film has been censored and pulled from multiple theaters, all because I listened and allowed other people the opportunity to listen. If I could give advice to anyone and to our society at large, we have to stop expecting to be offended. And instead, we have to start truly, openly, and sincerely listening. That will lead to a greater understanding of ourselves and others, having compassion for one another, working together towards solutions because we are all in this together. And once we do that, we can finally heal from the inside out. But it has to start with listening. Thank you for listening.